Okay, we are live on YouTube. So I'm going to share that link in both places. You should be able to use that in the second half of class to go back and rewatch what we're about to do. Make sure you have that link saved because you will probably be using it at the end of class. So anyway, let's kick off with stand up. What did we do yesterday?
We started with learning JavaScript and linking Java code to our HTML.
Yep, make sure you say JavaScript. We did not touch Java code.
Oh, I didn't say JavaScript?
Oops. No, you said Java the second time. So just be careful on that. You will get laughed out of a room if there are developers in it and you intermix Java and JavaScript. So okay. Just be careful because they are both still popular programming languages to this day.
Right.
So anyway, yes, we started with JavaScript. What did we kind of do with JavaScript? What functionality did we get out of that? Come on, there was something with tigers and pictures and form fields. We used the console, yep. What else? We set functions, yep. And we used event listeners and we got form values, very good, yep. So that was all the JavaScript stuff. On click, that's good. And then Corey, yep, you're bringing up a good thing as well of we also did that layout, right? And we started getting into the Navbar and flex and all of that kind of stuff. Anything else that people can remember? Okay. In that case, I will open up the floor to questions. Questions from yesterday, questions maybe about domains that you threw out that I forgot to answer, questions about anything that you've seen in the news, just opening the floor up.
I had a question. I was watching yesterday's video today and I was following along and everything is starting to make sense, but I still don't fully get like the flex and then the one.
Yep.
Like, I don't know if I don't know, like, what is the one or like, is it always one?
I don't have audio. So if someone could help me out in the chat or something, because I can't hear anything. Sorry.
I can help, Max.
Okay, thanks. Sorry. So basically what that flex is doing is it's kind of setting the size of the flex. So what we didn't play around with and what you can do is you can say, hey, I would like this to be a flex 2 and I would like this to be a flex 1. And the flex 2 is going to be twice as big as the flex 1. So if you have a flex 2 and a flex 2, it would be the same thing as saying a flex 1 and a flex 1. So basically, you're setting the size of the flex. The reason why we need to set the size of the flex is there is no default size. So while we're telling the parent, hey, display flex, we need the children to know that they should be flexing themselves. And so we did a flex 1 there because we wanted all 3 of them to be the same size. So if we wanted something in the center to be half the screen, and then we wanted 2 things on the left and right of it to be a quarter of the screen and a quarter of the screen, we could flex 1 on the first one, we could flex 2 on the second one, and then we could flex 1 on the third one, and that would give us the equivalent of the first div being 25% of the screen, the second div being 50% of the screen, and the third div being 25% of the screen. And so we didn't really care about that. We wanted them to all be equal sizes. But just because we set the flex on the parent, the display flex, the children were like, well, how big do you want me to be? I don't know how big to flex. And so that's why we set flex 1 on all 3 of them, because that's what said, oh, okay, we're all the same equal size. But if you wanted to, you could definitely flex for different sizes.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Max, I have a question. This is Latonia.
Shoot.
When we did the 4 for the label, and you went back afterwards, did you do that just so we can keep up, or is it just kind of standard practice to go back through your code afterwards and do that kind of stuff?
Both, yes. So it is, it's not something that you have to do afterwards. It's something that using a for tag is helpful, because when Dana comes in to start teaching accessibility next week, not only does it give you that functionality of being able to click on the label and have it focus on the text field, but it helps screen readers and visually impaired users to know, oh, whatever this label is matches up with this form field. And so when they are interacting, people who may be impaired with mouse movement may have a way where they need to fill out the web form, but they need to know like what that form input is asking them to do. And so linking that for field is a really good idea and encouraged for accessibility reasons. With that said, it is also standard practice to go back in and either clean up your code or refactor your code. So in my day-to-day work, I start a branch in Git to make sure that I'm not stepping on anyone else's toes. And that's something we didn't cover only because you're probably only working on your own code at this point. But then I go in, I do that I implement that feature, and that feature could be anywhere between 2 lines of code if it's a little bug fix, or it could be 2,000 lines of code and a big feature that we're rolling out, right? But as soon as I get it all working, that's when I go back into my Git and I go, all right, what files did I change here? And that's an opportunity before I Git add them or stage them. I'm able to look through all the code that I changed and make sure, oh, I didn't delete something that may get used somewhere else, or, oh, I wrote this new code, let me just double check it and make sure my brackets line up and any of that kind of stuff. So when I am doing that pass, that is when I may go back into my code and go, oh, look, I have a label tag here, but I forgot to put a 4 on it. Let me go drop that in so we get that added functionality. And so it is something that when you create your label, it's just a good idea to do your for tag. But it is also a good idea to go back in. Refactoring your code is normally something that happens like days or weeks later when you go back and you look at this code and you go, wow, this is really awful. I wonder who wrote this. And of course, the answer is almost always you. And you can go back and refactor, but it is good to do a pass before you commit your code and review it and see if you're missing anything. Welcome, Carolyn, to the hearing. Other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
This is Stacy. Yes. What is the difference between HTTPS and HTTP in the address?
Absolutely. Good question. And one that you will get a much more in-depth answer towards one of the last modules, which is around security. But basically, when the web was created so many eons ago, I'm kidding, but it was meant to just transmit information, right? It was meant to say, oh, you would like this business address and their store hours and their phone number, and here's all of that information and you're good to go. The web originally wasn't really built for you to upload information to websites. It was just for you to download that information from websites. But what ended up happening is we got into this era of web applications where you were uploading information and you wanted that information to be secure, right? Oh, I'm uploading my bank password and I'm signing into a bank site. I don't really want that password to be transmitted to my bank without any level of encryption. And so the S in HTTPS is actually for SSL, which is secure socket layer, which is a technique for encrypting data. But you can also think of that S as standing for secure. And so what that is doing is when you load a website on the internet over HTTP, everything that you get from that website and anything that you send back up to that website is not encrypted. You're just getting that plain text. And now that is such a common problem that if you go to sign in on a website in Chrome and it is not over HTTPS, it will actually pop up a little warning before you can sign in and say, hey, you're about to send your password over plain text. You may want to rethink that, or just a heads up that this may be a little insecure. And so that HTTPS initially was very technically involved to get set up and installed, because you had to get something called a certificate, which is basically, there's a whole rabbit hole I could go down on explaining certificates, but the good news is it has gotten easier to set up your website over HTTPS. There are now free ways of setting up HTTPS, which was not true in the past. But that is the major difference between your HTTP and HTTPS, is basically anything you send to or from that HTTPS website has a SSL certificate with it, which is just a technical way of saying that that data is encrypted. Great question, though.
Thank you.
Other questions? Carolyn, are you talking to us?
Yeah, I don't talk to myself. My husband does. This is just an aside, but I still can't get my froggy in the middle of the pond at level 6. I'm hoping for some empathy from somebody. My husband and I were joking about it.
We will at the end of class. Feel free to bring that up,
yeah,
or during the
okay.
break, and
Yeah.
we can talk through it.
Yeah, there's a little levity there, but anyway, so if I get some sympathy, because my frog doesn't want to move. Anyway, sorry. It's been a rough start here. Here we
All
go.
good.
Yep, it is.
All right. Any other questions? All right. So who is pumped for class tonight? We are jumping into warp speed. We are going to make an entire news website, and we are going to do it fast. So let me get into my screen share here. Maybe. So here is the site that we are going to make. We are going to use Bootstrap for just the grid component. You could definitely make this entire site with Flex. The reason that I am using grid is honestly because I can't tell you the last time I've made a website without grid. And so there are places where there is obviously a grid, right? Like if we look at this column, there's a column here, there's a column here, and there's a column here. But there are other places that you may not think there are grids, but we will use them for layout, like up at the top, to have our menu, our name, and our sign-in button up at the top. So point of tonight's exercise is to kind of intermix both layout and also be able to hook into our CSS and be able to run with that fast. So we can do little custom elements like have that bar up at the top to make it look like Top Stories is selected. So we're going to go in there. We're going to start from scratch again. We are going to pull in our Bootstrap. This time we are going to skip our normalize.css or reset CSS because Bootstrap has a lot of that baked in for us. We're going to get our style sheet set up, and then we're going to start from the top and work our way down to the bottom. So we're going to go fast. Feel free to ask me questions. If you are feeling super daring and think that you can follow along with me, feel free to. I am not going to stop you. But keep in mind that the reason I'm going so fast is that the entire second half of class, you can spend working on this and catching up and asking individual questions as well. So all of this is on YouTube. If you would like to open the YouTube link that I have sent in the chat and hit the pause button at this very moment, you will have a timestamp of where we're at or where we got started on all of this. You should be able to rewind it as well if you forget to do that, but I'm going to confirm that right now. Working on this and catching up and yes, you can rewind in YouTube. Stop it. Okay. So sorry about that echo there. You can rewind it in YouTube as well, but we're going to go pretty quickly through all of this. Does anyone have any questions on this layout before we dive in?
You said the link was in the chat?
Yeah, I'll send it again.
Yeah, my chat got blown out when that one came in. All right. Was it in Slack? Because I didn't see it.
It is both in Slack and in the Zoom chat.
Oh.
And Caitlin made a great point of write down any questions as we're going. Feel free to ask those questions if it's relevant, or if you want to just keep a running list of questions. I can answer them all at the end as well. And then any notes, feel free to take notes as well.
That one came in. Right. Was it in Slack? Because I didn't see it.
All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop over to my VS Code. And I have two of them open, which is not good. Okay. So what you will find is when you get into your code editor, it's very common to see something that looks like this up at the top, right? Where you've got all these windows open, and it's very natural to just start opening more of them. So I would encourage you to get in the practice of closing out your files if you're not going to be working on them. So we could go old school and just hit the X button on all of them. But if you right click on all of them, or any of them, you get this option to close tabs to the right or close other tabs. And in there is also a close all. So I'm going to hit close all. And then in the spirit of staying organized, I'm going to right click on my week 2 folder and create a new folder. And I'm going to call it day 3 news and 331. Okay, and whatever organization system works for you, feel free to name it that way. I'm going to pop in here and I'm going to create my index.html. And I know I'm going to need some CSS as well. So I'm going to create my style.css. And that's pretty much all I need. So I'm going to go into my HTML. I'm going to hit my exclamation and tab, and I'm going to get, whoa, I don't know how that popped up. Sorry about that. Okay. So I'm in here. And so what I am able to do is in title, I am able to just type in news site, and good habit to get into linking your CSS as well. So I'm going to do my link rel style sheet, and my href is equal to style.css, and we are good to go. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to right click. I'm going to hit reveal in Finder because my OpenWith hates me in VS Code. Not quite sure why. And I get this lovely white screen. So 2 things I like to do. One, I like to make sure that I can see something. So I'm just going to type in test. I'm going to hit save. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh. My test shows up. It's what I wanted. And so I'm going to go into my style sheet. I'm going to target my H1. I'm going to make it the color red. I'm going to save that, and I'm going to refresh. And all of that is the nature of testing your code frequently, right? We just want to make sure that our link is working, that we are making progress on getting everything wired up. So that's great. I'm going to delete this out because I don't need it. And the other thing that I need to do is get my Bootstrap in here. So I'm going to open a new Chrome tab. I'm going to do a search for getbootstrap.com. You can also just go to Google and type in Bootstrap. It will be the top link. I'm going to click Get Started. And down here is this CSS for me. So I'm going to hit copy there. I'm going to come back over to my index.html. And I'm going to put that above my style sheet. And the reason why that's important is there will be times where I want to override Bootstrap with my own styling. And if I had my style sheet above it, Chrome would say, no, we'll apply your styles and smack Bootstrap right on top of it, and Bootstrap will override you. So that order is important, right? We want to say, hey, go get Bootstrap, and then also get my style sheet, and whatever is in my style sheet should override what is in Bootstrap. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to put my H1 back in. I'm going to hit say test. I'm going to come over to my new site. I can close this. I'm going to refresh. And notice a couple things happen for us. One, the default padding that always gets in our way has gone. But we don't have that ugly Times New Roman either. We just got a default font that Bootstrap is setting for us, and they're taking care of that in the CSS. So one thing that I encourage you to do whenever you start on a new site is just pick a different font. Later in the course, we can go over Google fonts and how to pull in non-default system fonts. But for right now, that's just a styling tweak that I can throw out there for you is if you are not using Bootstrap, one thing that will make a site look infinitely better is changing it to a font other than Times New Roman. Carolyn, you can just hit allow or OK on that, and that should get you into my code. Okay, so let's go back to our source. And by the way, if you guys would like to see this as you're designing, or if you have multiple monitors going on in the GitHub repo, I already have a screenshot of this posted. So you can go take a look in there and have this up for reference, both in class tonight and while you're working on your homework. I have not created the Google Classroom assignment yet. But the assignment is basically going to say, recreate this screenshot, and it's going to have you upload your files that you used with it. So where do we start?
At the top.
At the top, we're going to get started with, this kind of acts as a nav bar, and I would call this almost a header element, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to pop over to our code. I'm going to delete my test. And we are going to get started with a div class equals container dash fluid. And the reason we do that is Bootstrap has two container types. They have a container that will only let your screen get to a certain width, and then everything else kind of gets contained in there. The reasoning that you want that is if you have a super wide monitor screen and you drag it all the way open, you don't want your content all spread out. You kind of want to say, hey, don't get any bigger than this certain size. The reason we are using container fluid here is it is typical for headers to span the entire width of the monitor, no matter how wide it is. The other reason we need a container is that the padding on the grid system gets very cranky if it is not in a container. So we are saying, hey, before we start using rows and columns and doing all kinds of grid stuff, we need something to hold all of it. And the way you can think about that is we need a parent element to display flex on. And that is what under the hood, the div class container is doing for us. So we are only going to use probably about 5 different classes from Bootstrap tonight. Container and container fluid are 2 of them. And then row and column are the other 2. And then we are going to use some text alignment, text center, and text end. And I'm going to try and keep everything to that. If you wanted more information about these classes, you could either go to getbootstrap.com and start looking at the documentation, or you could be patient and wait for Caitlin to start teaching in 2 weeks. And she's going to start going through that with you as well and start showing you kind of where that documentation is, what the documentation is telling you, and how you can go and implement that in your code. So again, we are just using Bootstrap for layout classes tonight, but you will be getting into more of Bootstrap down the road. So what I'm going to do is, if we go back to our style, what this says to me is, oh, this looks like a row, right? This looks like a row across the page. And in here, it looks like we have a column here, a column here, and a column here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say div class equals row. And then inside that row, we are going to have 3 div class col. And I'm going to say menu. I'm going to say div class equals col. And I'm going to do my news company here. And then I'll do 1/3 column for my sign in button. So I pop back over here, I go to my Chrome, I refresh my page, and all of a sudden we've got 3 columns. We didn't have to flex, we didn't have to target the parent and the children, because we just structured our HTML and used those CSS classes. Bootstrap was like, I got you covered, I can lay all of that out. So when we come over here, we can see our row and our columns. Columns always have to be nested in a row. And we know it's nested based off of that indentation. And rows should always be used in a container fluid. You can get away with not doing that, but what you end up with is some weird scroll bar sometimes where you're getting padding where you don't want padding. And so putting it in a container, either a container or a container fluid, is definitely encouraged. Okay, so let's hop back over here. And we are going to kind of think about this as finishing different components on the page tonight. So let's get this component finished. We've got some styling on that, right? So first, let's get our layout working before we get into our colors. Sorry, I forgot. So for our news company here, where do we want that to go?
In the center.
In the center. So we could go to our CSS and we could add a selector on that and text align dash center if we wanted to, or we could just use text dash center, which is another Bootstrap class. And what that does for us is it centers it. And in this one, we are going to text. Now, it used to be text dash right. It is now text dash end in an ode to Flexbox, because you flex to the end, right? And so we're going to refresh, and we got that over there. All right, that's great. But now I want to dive into my custom styling. So I'm going to come up here, and I am going to question how I pulled that off. Hold on. I do have my cheater code up, so we are on the same track. Okay, so what I did is, instead of adding another class in here called Navbar, which we totally could do, and that would totally work, I'm going to change this div to say nav. And what that does is it helps Google and other search engines and screen readers know, hey, instead of using some arbitrary class name that we just came up with, it helps the screen reader and Google know, hey, the contents of this are navigationally tied and related. So when I come over to my style, what I am able to do is say, hey, my nav, I would like to be a background of dark blue. So I save, I go to my Chrome, I refresh, and I get my dark blue. But what you notice there is that contrast is really hard, right? You probably can't even see that there's text in there. So all we have to do is say, hey, I would like my color to be white. And I come back over here and I refresh. I go, that's not looking bad. What's wrong there? What's jumping out at you from a design perspective?
It needs padding.
It needs padding, exactly. And the answer 9 times out of 10 when a end user comes to you and goes, this doesn't look right, is that you need padding. So I'm going to add padding of 15 pixels, and I'm not going to specify top, left, right, or bottom. And so that just means it's going to add padding everywhere. And all of a sudden, look at that huge difference where you go, oh, that now looks like a nav bar, right? And without the padding, you're like, that just looks like content you just vomited up in HTML. And now all of a sudden you go, oh, with that padding, that actually looks like what I would see at the top of a website. Good question by Carolyn. Do you ever use hex colors anymore? So by hex colors, instead of saying dark blue, I can put a hashtag in here, and I can say 00FF00. And what that's going to give me is some combination of red, green, and blue values to give me this teal color. So if I back that out and I say 00FFFF, nope, I'm sorry, flip that. FF00FF, we get pure red, right? And so what you're doing is you're opening up the spectrum of colors and being able to put in a specific color that you want to target. VS Code has it built in where you can kind of pick the color. So if I want a green, I can shift to a certain color and then go, oh, I'd like that to be a little darker. And it automatically updated that color for me. Some text editors have that built in, other ones don't. For the sake of class, I'm just using the built-in colors to CSS3. And you can see VS Code is already aware of all of them, and it's helping me out in putting them in. With that said, when you are working with a designer whose job is just to make mockups, those high fidelity mockups are going to have specific hex colors in them already. And they will tend to use a palette. So they will reuse anywhere between 2 and 5 different colors. And then you will take the hex colors right out of that mockup and use it in your CSS. So it is definitely hex is something that is still used. But for the sake of readable code and for the sake of just being able to grab colors, I am using the colors that are built into CSS. Okay, making progress. 1 component down, 1 to go. So how do you think we are going to start the next section?
Another row?
Another row. So we're going to come back over here, and we are going to get a little fancy here. So
I have another question about the nav div. You just changed div to nav, but you didn't change the closing tag. How come that didn't cause an error?
Great question. It did in Chrome, but Chrome was like, I can read your crappy code and figure it out myself. So I don't think Chrome will tell you that it is wrong in the no, because this is more of the JavaScript console. So there is something you can do called validating your HTML, where if you put that code in, it would actually highlight that for you and go, this is an opening tag with no closing tag, this is wrong. Chrome, on the other hand, is going, I'll take your crappy code and show it anyway. But that was a great catch, and that is definitely something that I should change in both places. And to be totally honest, my text editor that I use at work, when you change the opening tag, it automatically updates the closing tag for you, which is why I didn't catch that, but a good thing to catch. Okay, so I'm going to keep this kind of all in my nav. Why did I write that? No, I'm gonna. Okay, it's gonna come down here. Now I'm going to do a new div, and I know we're gonna write some CSS on this, so I'm gonna think in advance, and I'm going to give it a class of quick links. Okay, and in our quick links, I want 4 links: top stories, news, sports, and life. So what I'm going to do is I am going to do an A tag, and in there I will say top stories, I'm going to do an A tag and I'm going to say news. I'm going to do another A tag and I am going to say sports. And then I'm going to do my final tag and I'm going to say life. Oop. Save, go back to Chrome, refresh. And that's actually not terrible, right? All right. So let's get some styling working on that. So I could come up here and I could just say text center if I wanted to and pop over here and over goes my text. But just to prove to you that we don't have to use Bootstrap, I'm going to come back to my style.css. I'm going to target my quick links using a period at the beginning because I put a class on that. And I am going to text align to center. I'm going to save. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh. And we get the same exact effect because all text center is doing in Bootstrap is calling some CSS on the Bootstrap side that does that same exact thing and text align center. So we're calling the same things. Okay. Now I would like to make this look more like this. I'm sorry, this to look more like this. So what is the first thing that jumps out at you? There is a bold font, but what I want to do first is I want to get that spacing in there because that breathing room, again, makes it feel like it's less of all those things shoved in there and more breathing in there. So we aren't actually going to use flex. Let me confirm that before we're not going to use flex anywhere. And so the reason we don't need to use flex is because we're taking advantage of that grid system. However, this entire site could be remade without the grid at all and could be made with flex. What you'll find is that grid system is just a faster way to get your layout onto the page. However, the flex gives you a lot more ability to get things where you want them to be. It gives you a lot more flexibility, pun kind of intended. And that is, so anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I just want to get some spacing working there. So what I'm going to do is that spacing isn't actually on quick links itself. It's on the children of quick links, right? So I'm going to write quick links and I am going to target the A tag in my quick links. And I'm going to say, oh, I would like some margin on the left of it. And let's just say 10 pixels. And I would like some margin on the right of them. And we'll make them 10 pixels as well. So I come over here, I refresh. All of a sudden, all right, we've got some breathing room there. Okay, let's go back here. Hey, that breathing room is nice, but that width, that design looks really nice because that width of the top bar is the same width as the bottom bar. So again, that goes to padding. So the padding is going to be on the quick links itself, right? On the parent component. So what I'm going to do is I am going to add a little padding to the top and we'll say 10 pixels and we'll add some padding to the bottom and we'll also make that 10 pixels. So I come over here, I refresh and okay, that's looking good, but that padding bottom didn't really do anything. And what makes this kind of stand out as a nav bar that we don't have over here?
You need a border.
That border, exactly. So what are we going to use for a border?
One pixel, black, solid.
Yep, you got it. So we're going to say border bottom because we don't want the border around, all four sides. And then we are going to say 1px solid black. Oops. Come back over here. We're going to refresh and we've got our border in there. Okay. So what this is meant to demonstrate here is that top stories is kind of what you're active on right now. So what we would do is we would use JavaScript. So when you clicked on sports, it would not only scroll you down to the sports section, but that orange bar would kind of move over to under sports. So what we're going to do is we are going to add a tag to our top stories and we're going to call it active, as in that is the active link that we are on right now. And so what we're going to do is we're going to come back over here and we're going to grab our active tag. And we are going to say, we're going to use a new property called font-weight. And we're going to say 700. 700 is considered bold. 900 is considered extra bold. 500 is considered regular. And then you can also go under 500 down to 300, which is considered thin, and all the way down to 100, which is considered ultra thin. So we're going to put a font weight in there. We're going to save. We're going to go look at that. We're going to refresh. And all of a sudden, we've got that a little bit more bold. Now, notice something funky happened there. It got the link styling. And we go, oh, well, something's helping us out there, but we don't want it to look like that. I want it to look like this. So what we are able to do is just override that. So in our quick links, I'm going to say, I don't care. I want my color to be black. I want it to be black all the time. And that underline is in a property called text decoration. And I'm going to say none. Don't decorate it at all. So I pop back over to Chrome. I refresh, and now we're there. So that's looking good. There's just one more aspect that we have over here. What kind of pulls it all together? That orange line. And how do you think we're going to do that orange line? We're going to get fancy and use the border. So all it is a border on the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop into my active tag, and I'm going to say border bottom. But this time, because it's a thicker line, I'm going to say 5px, and I'm going to say solid, and I'm going to pick orange. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh. Okay, well, that's there, but it's not where I want it to be, right? Like, it looks nice down there. How do I get it down there?
Remove the
Yes,
margin?
I change the padding. And why do I change the padding and not the margin? Because padding is between the border and the margin, right? So it goes padding, border, and then margin. So if I want to push that border down, the margin is outside of the border, so it's not going to affect the border. But the padding is inside the border, and that's what I want to use to push it down. So I'm going to pop over here to my A tag, and I am going to say padding bottom, and I'm going to say 8px. Come over here, I'm going to say refresh, and all of a sudden that dropped it down. Now, how do I know 8px? Because I've cheated and I already did all of this. What I would normally do is guess 10, and it would be wrong, and then I would guess 5, and it would be wrong again. And then I would get smart, and I would right click here and go into my inspect. And then in my padding bottom, I can click right here, and just using the up and down arrow keys, see it move. And as soon as I get it to where I want it to be, I'm going to stop and go 8. That's what I want. I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to type in 8, and that will save it into my code. So those little things is how you can use inspect to kind of get where you want it to go. Okay, we come over here, we refresh. I come over here, I refresh. I don't know. We're making pretty good progress here. What do you guys think? All right, so I'm going to go into the next section. What do you think we are going to use for that? The grid. Yep. Susan, we're not using flex at all tonight. So we're doing everything in the grid for layout. So what this is one giant row that has a column and a column and a column, right? And so what we will do is we're going to start using grids inside of grids to lay things out. But it's important to be able to identify this giant thing is going to be a grid, right? And that's one big row. and this is another row, and this is a third row. But what we're going to do is I want to break out. We were doing all of this in a container fluid. And so what that means, I'm going to shrink my screen way down here. And so I know you can't read any of that, but do you see how this blue bar and the links goes all the way over? That's the container fluid that's working there with us. So if I make my monitor even bigger, it's going to stay in there, right? And if you look at in this section, that's not a container fluid. We're going to put that in a regular container. So that means if I open this super big on my 28-inch monitor, I'm not going to have latest all the way over here and then a lot of white space and then my center content and a lot of white space and then my ads all the way over on the right. It's going to keep that all constrained. Now, I know this is an exaggeration, but if you go to the NewYorkTimes.com right now and open it as big as you can on a 13-inch monitor, it might not be big enough. But on a bigger monitor, you will see all of a sudden they start adding white space to the sides. So all of your content lives in the center. And so that's the difference between the container and the container fluid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here. I'm going to create another div, and I'm just going to do a div class container. And what I like to do is I like to get all of my layout done first before I start putting content in each of those sections. So I'm going to do a div, and I'm going to do a class of row because columns always have to be in rows. I'm not going to forget my equals. And then I'm going to do a div class equals col. I'm going to say col1. I'm going to say div class equals col. And I'll say col2, and then I'll do my div class equals col, and I'll do my col3. Okay, so I'm going to pop back over here. I'm going to refresh, and that's all looking good. But there's something wrong there, and you can't really tell what's wrong until we add some border on it, because you can't really feel out the sizing of this. So what I'm going to do is I am going to add 3 classes to this. I'm going to say this is my left col, this is my center col, and this is my right col. And so we're going to do something new in our CSS. I want to actually target all 3 of those, but they don't share the same class name. So what I can do is I can say left col and then just use a comma and comma separate out several selectors that we want to target here. So I'm going to say center col. Oops, don't forget your period. And I'm going to say my right col. And I want to put a border on the right of them that is 1px solid black. Okay. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh. And I got my borders. But something's not right there. And if I come over here, it doesn't exactly match. So what are the 2 things, not looking at the content, but just looking at the columns that we're able to identify are wrong? Kind of on the padding, on the spacing, there is definitely a little spacing on the top. So yes, that is a padding issue. The one thing that we're noticing here that's going to make this much more visually different is this border runs all the way down, right? And so that's what's making it feel separate. Even though these ads end right here, we still want that line to go all the way down, right? So what we are going to do is we are going to put a minimum height on them. And we're going to get fancy. And instead of using pixels or percentages, we're going to say something called 100 VH. That stands for viewport height. And so the viewport is this entire area. It starts all the way up here and goes all the way down to here, right? And so you notice I have a little scroll bar going on in mine right now. That's because this div is going to be 100%. And isn't factoring in this height or this height. So we can get fancy and fix that down the road. But right now I'm just saying, look, I want it to be pretty big. I want it to be at least the whole screen. Just lengthen that out for me. So I'm going to save. I'm going to go back into my code. I'm going to refresh. And all of a sudden, we've got them pushed all the way down. All right, that's great. We've got that pushed down. There's one other thing that's wrong. And it may be a little bit more obvious if I open this up to full screen.
Isn't there an extra line down one side, the far right side?
This one?
Nope. Charlie's on the other side of Charlie's. Are we
Yep,
supposed to have
right
another
here.
line over there?
Yeah, so the way we could do that is we're gonna just not put a border on the right column class, but we're gonna fix that in a second. So anything that you see in here, we can actually, you know what, let's do that now before I forget. Okay. What do you notice between this and this?
There needs to be a space between the horizontal border and the vertical ones.
Yep. So let's grab that. I put that in my quick links. Now I want to be on the outside of the border this time, right? So I'm going to put a margin on the bottom. That's 10px. And what that will do is shove everything underneath it down a little bit. Okay, we're almost there. It's kind of hard to tell. So what I'm going to do is I am going to put borders on.
Shouldn't the middle section be bigger than the other two?
Exactly. So if I'm going to just add a border so you guys can see. Now, all of a sudden, when you add that border, you're able to see this column isn't quite as wide as this column, but it's the same width as this column, right? And that may be hard to see, but when you're loading a news website, those little design details make you go, oh, this is kind of, think about a newspaper, right? I've got my main headline article in the center, but then I've got sides filled with little columns of text. So you are completely right. So in order to resize them, what we are going to do is use that 12-based column system. So what we have here, everything is based off of 12 already, but because we didn't give it any numbers, it is basically looking at this and going, these should be 3 equally sized columns. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my code, and in the HTML, because we want to target in Bootstrap, I'm going to say, remember, everything has to add up to 12. So if I want it to be 50% of my screen, I'm going to take 12, I'm going to divide it by 2, and that's going to give me 6. So I'm going to make that a col 6. And I'm going to come up here and I'm going to say, well, I want this to be a quarter of my screen. So I take 12 and I divide it by 4 and I get 3. And this one, I could say I want it to be a 3 as well. But because we already put a 3 and a 6 in here, Bootstrap's like, don't worry, I got math under my belt. I understand how to do this. I'll just take up the remaining space. And so I pop over here, I refresh, and it does nothing because I forgot to save my HTML. Good reminder to save your HTML. And now all of a sudden, we've got that spaced out the way we want it. Okay, I know I'm going light speed here, so I'm going to stop for questions. Corey, that is a great thing that you noticed. The border lines are actually a different color. I didn't even notice that in my design until I was looking at my code. If we go back over here, you notice let me save this because I think I added it. This border is very strong, right? It's just kind of jumping out at you and saying, this is a separate section, completely differentiate these two. But these two aren't blinding your eye, right? And that is it's a very hard thing to see. What I did over here was instead of using black, I just made it gray. And so there is a design philosophy or principle that you should never use a pure color, which means pure black or pure white. And the reason on that is because those colors or lack of colors really jump out to the eye so much that it overwhelms you in your design. So most designers will use something that's a little tiny bit of gray that to your eye, you go, oh no, that's black. But when you compare it to pure black, you're able to tell that difference and it just feels a little softer on you. The same goes for white. People don't use a pure white, they use a tiny little touch of gray in there, and all of a sudden your eye doesn't feel like it's getting assaulted with all of that. So if you couldn't tell, I'm not really a designer, so I'm not always good at remembering that and remembering to use something that's a little tiny off black and a little tiny off white. But for something like those borders, we can tell all of a sudden, oh, that's a much nicer soft line that isn't really, driving us into 3 columns and this is, it. I don't have a color that I use for off-white off the top of my head. But what I could do is I could come up here and instead of saying white, I can hover over that little rectangle, that little square, and just come here and drag down my white color. And what that's going to do is it sets the opacity. So ivory is kind of what we're going for here. It's just that little off white. So if I come back over here and I refresh, you probably can't tell the difference. I would probably need to go for a little bit more dropping down the opacity there. But that little off white is something that's supposed to help. And the same goes for my text. So if I target the body tag and I say I want my color to be black, what I'm able to do is come back in here and go, well, I didn't really mean black. I meant a little off black. So I can save, I can come over here and I can refresh and it's a little lighter for you.
So it did pop it in. When you hit the palette, it did pop in the code, the name of the color for you.
Yes, it's not the name of the color. RGBA is another way you can set color values, just like you can use hex codes as well. So there are all different kinds of ways that you can set color in CSS land. This is just the way that instead of Bootstrap using a hex value, instead of VS Code using a hex value, they put in RGBA instead, which is fine to do as well. But yes, Carolyn, it's a graduation of black or graduation of white as well. Okay. Any other questions? All right. We're going to keep trucking here because I've got a deadline and we want to get most of this done before our 7 o'clock break. So you guys have plenty of time to work on it yourselves. Okay. So much like working top to the bottom, I like to start on the left and work my way over to the right. So what do you think we're going to use for that thing that says latest up at the top?
H1.
And H1, exactly. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to delete out my col1. And I'm going to say H1, and I'm going to say latest, and I refresh, come over here, I look at my code, and I got latest. All right, that's looking good. Now let's go back here. Before we think about coding this out, we want to think about the layout of this. What do you notice about this layout? Kind of indented, kind of text align left. Latonia, you got it. It is 2 columns. It is 2 columns that are not evenly sized, but it is 2 columns there. And the other thing is this is a row, this is another row, and this is another row.
Yeah.
So we're going to go back into our code. And sometimes
I don't like how it looks, actually.
It may just because it's zoomed in. It may look a
there
little
you go.
better when you zoom in
That's
out.
definitely, okay, gotcha.
And that's something that you kind of pay the price whenever you zoom in the page.
Yes.
Your layout isn't going to look the way the designer originally intended it to.
Yeah.
But it is if you head to a certain news site that is the name of the city.com, you may find where I got this inspiration. I'm not saying that I did that. I'm not saying, but if you're wondering where I'm reproducing this from, there are actually copyright issues if you load a website while you are screen sharing and posting that content on YouTube. YouTube goes, wait, you don't own this content. You're not allowed to show that, right? Especially for a news website where the headline and the articles are copyrighted themselves, in addition to the website that you're showing. And so I've tried to be clear on making everything myself. And even these images I pulled from Unsplash, which are royalty-free, copyright-free images, so that we don't run into any issues of you guys going to look at this class tomorrow and YouTube saying, no, you use copyright content. We're not hosting that for you. So anyway, definitely something to be careful of. When you make a website for someone else, you can't just go on Google Images, grab an image and go, oh, I want to use this in my site, because you will run into copyright issues there. And so sites like Unsplash are a great source for those images. So anyway, let's get back into this. What I'm going to do is underneath my H1, I'm going to do a div class equals row. And in my row, because we don't use columns without rows, I'm going to do a div class equals col. And I'm just going to put I'm just going to say 1. And then I'll do another div class equals col. And I'll say 2. And I'm going to save that. I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to refresh. What happened? Let's go back into my code.
All shaken up like the salad shaker thing.
Broke something. So I've got my opening H1 and my closing H1. I've got my div class row. And so you notice what I'm doing here is I'm fixing the indentation just so my eye can figure out where I'm missing something, right? And so I'm going to do my div class row. I'm going to indent that. I think someone already found the issue in chat, but I'm going to keep going on this. And so I've got my div class closing this row, but I don't have my div closing this column, right? And so what it did is it went, oh, you don't have that closing div. I'm going to take everything else and shove it in that column for you. And it's like, oh, whoa, that's not what we want. So I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to know that indentation wise, I'm supposed to have my closing div in there. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh and we got everything back to where we want to. So that's a good reminder of, even though you can write code at 1,000,000 miles an hour, you don't want to write it all without checking every couple minutes, going to your browser and refreshing it, because otherwise finding all of those nested divs can really become a headache. Okay, so we've got our 1 and our 2 here, but what did we say was special about those columns?
They each have individual rows in them as well.
They're different widths. So the columns themselves are different widths. So we've already done different width columns. How do we tell it, oh, I want that column to be a different width? What did we use in the design already where we said, oh, different columns? Col 1, you got it, Mel. So what we are going to do is that col 1 is going to be super tight in that tiny little space, because we're not talking about the entire width of the viewport that's available to us. we're talking about that 12 column system is now scrunched between here and here, right? And so instead of using a col 1, which we probably could do, I'm going to use a col 2 just in case. And now we could come in here and say col 10, but Bootstrap is like, oh, if you're making the first one a 2, that other one must be a 10. I'm just going to take up the available space. So when I save, come back over here and refresh, I get my 2 that has moved over. Okay, so we're going to come in here and I'm going to say, oh, let's say 6 minutes ago, I wrote that article and the headline is going to say headline 1. Save, I'm going to refresh and okay, that's kind of good. I'm going to come over here. What's different?
The size of the text is smaller
size.
and
Yep. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop in here and I'm just going to use an H3 tag. Just because I know H2 is going to be a little too big for us. So I'm going to save. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to refresh. Nope. And I'm going to be on the right page. All of a sudden we get our headline 1 in there. All right. So we're rocking and rolling. I'm going to take this whole row and I'm going to copy and paste it and save and come over here and refresh. And I get headline 1, headline 1, headline 1. All right. So one thing to test in your code is you want to see how that code is going to wrap, right? So I'm going to say headline 2 with a longer description that might make it to another line. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to pop open this. I'm going to refresh. And now I just want to make sure, hey, did that 6 minutes jump down on me? Or, oh, is that going over the borderline? Or, you know, you just want to check the design and make sure when you get an input that may be longer than your design calls for, that you're planning for that as well. And then so I'll just come back down here and name this headline 3. And because I'm anal, I'm going to put a space in that and got it done. Okay, we are making progress. Let's get an image in there. Column 2, round 2. Let's go. So I'm going to come down here. I'm going to go into my column 2. And I am going to use a image tag. Lena, you already beat me to the question. And so I already have this file on my computer. And so what I'm going to do is, my computer is going to freeze on me, decide to show me up. So I already have these 3 images, both the headline image, add 1 and add 2, already somewhere on my computer. They happen to be in the code base folder. You are welcome to go to Unsplash and grab some images that you want from there. You're welcome to use your own images as long as you have copyright to them. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop open my code in Finder, and all I'm going to do is grab these 3 images and copy them into my day 3 news folder so I can reference them locally. And so I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to say my image source is equal to headline.jpg. I'm going to, close out that tag. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to go to my news site. I'm going to refresh. That's a big image. That's a, whoa, that's a really big image. All right, let's wrangle that a little bit. I'm going to come back over to my CSS. I am going to figure out what I did here. Okay, so what I did is I put an ID on this so I can target it, right? And I called it headline image. And then I come back over to my style sheet. I go to the bottom and I do a headline image. And I say my width on that is going to be 100%. So I come back to my code, I refresh, and all of a sudden it's in there. But I want to do a second check in there, right? If I come over here and I zoom way out again, you notice that image is still pretty big. This would be on like on a 24-inch monitor or 30-inch monitor or whatever. And it's like, that's too big for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in here and I'm going to say, I would like the maximum width to be, let's say 400 pixels. So I save that, I come over here, I refresh, and now that's smaller, but it's over on the left, right? And design-wise, that doesn't look right either. So I'm going to come back in and I need some way to center that. But I can't center it itself unless I use flex, which I could do, but I promised we're not gonna use flex. So what I'm gonna do instead is I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna create a new div, and I'm going to call it image container. And I'm gonna move that closing div tag. And then I'm going to go into my style and I'm going to say image container. And in that, I'm going to text align center. Ironically, because we're not centering text, but the reason we can use text align center is because image elements default to a display of inline. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to refresh, and I got my image in the center. But when I blow it back up, because the width is set to 100, that max width is going, oh, that doesn't matter. We're below that max width. So it still displays everything fine. And if you come over here into my code, you'll see it does the same thing, right? It's got this centered space around it. But if we blow it way up, all of a sudden it won't have those white spaces. Okay. Doing good. Let's fly through the next column. So I'm going to come down back into my code, and I am going to say, outside of my image container, I am going to have some story about new developers. And I'm using that H3 because I knew the size of the H3 was right over in my left column, so it's probably right in my center column as well. And then I'm going to do a p tag, and I'm going to say something like and an enticing tagline that'll make you read it. And then let's say I also want my name to show up as the author of the piece, and maybe when I posted it. And let's see what that looks like. So I come over here, I refresh. And it's not terrible, but a lot of space in there, right? Like spacing can be your friend and make the design, but it can also ruin it, right? So I want to get in there and I want to adjust the spacing so it looks a little bit more like this, right? The headline has some breathing room underneath it, but the author's name is right underneath. So I know I'm going to have to target some things in there. So I'm going to go back to my HTML, and I'm going to add a class to this, and I'm going to call this synopsis. And then I'm going to come into my p tag, and I'm going to add a class to that called author. And then I am going to go into my style sheet and look at my code again. And I'm going to look here, and I'm going to go, that synopsis has too much space beneath it, right? But I don't know where that space is. I don't know where that's coming from. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to go into inspect. I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom here. And what I'm going to see is I've got a margin of 16 in there. So that's how I know what I want to get rid of. But I can double click on that and just hit the delete button. And all of a sudden my name jumps back up. So that's how I know, oh yeah, that's definitely what I want. The browser does not automatically refresh. When you change your code, I'm hitting the Command R key a lot, which is refreshing it for me. However, that is something that you will, a benefit that you will get from React is that when you change your React code and save it, the browser will automatically refresh for you. So that is definitely possible to set up. So anyway, I'm going to come down here. I'm going to target my synopsis, and my synopsis is going to have a margin at the bottom of 0. And whenever we use 0, you notice we don't say 0px because 0 is absolute, right? 0px is the same as 0%, which is the same as 0 point. So we can just say 0 there. So I come over here, I refresh, and that holds, right? Because we changed it in the dev tools. All right, we're making progress. Now let's go back. What do you notice about my name over here? It is a gray font. And again, that is just making it less bold, right? Because yeah, you want to read the article. You don't really care about who wrote the article, but you still want it to show up there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop down here. I'm going to target my author, and I'm going to say I would like my color to be gray. Come in back to my code. Get out of here, Zoom. Sorry. I refresh, and my color is now gray. All right, so we are making good progress. You can zoom out one more level, zoom out 2 more levels. All right, that's looking pretty good. Go back to my design. Yeah, that's lining up pretty good there. Oh, you know what? I'm just going to change my max width to 500 because that's what I used in my code. And that will make it more consistent. And I want to make sure my zoom levels are the same so we can get a better idea. Okay, that's looking good. Looking good over here. All right, what's next?
Go down to a different story, or no, the items listed.
Those bullet points. Yeah. So what I'm
Right,
going to
sorry.
do is I'm going to come underneath my author, and I'm going to use the UL. And Mel and Latonia, you're already on it. UL stands for an unordered list. The opposite of an unordered list. Anyone?
Ordered list,
An
OL.
ordered list, an OL, and that's going to show up as numbers, right? So then in here, I use an LI, which is my list item. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say some bullet point, and I'm going to do another list item that says this article is fascinating. And then I'll do another list item, and I'll throw in a little Easter egg for you. All right, so let's come over here. We're going to refresh. And you know what? Default styling and padding there, I don't hate it, right? Like I want some breathing room between the synopsis and the bullet points that show up. All right, that's fine. Sometimes we don't need to go in and tweak. All right, so I come back over here, and now there's another story, right? The idea is that we're scrolling through this, and there is a border there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here, and the image only shows up for the headline, right? So I need some way to differentiate between all of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here, and I'm going to say this is one article, right? And I'm going to come down here, and this is another HTML5 tag that's built in that helps the search engine look at this and go, oh, you're linking to this article. Oh, now this is a separate article as well. So I'm going to copy all of this. I'm going to paste it right underneath. And all I'm going to do is kill my image and the headline. And we're going to go back in. We're going to refresh on the right page. And all of this still looks good. And we've got another thing here. So that's all good. But that little line is really helping, saying, hey, look, this is something different, right? So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to target my article. And I'm just going to say there's a border at the bottom of that. That is 1 pixel. It's solid and it's black. You can make it gray. You can make it orange. Whatever you're feeling. We're going to refresh. And there's our border. All right, guys. We're crossing the finish line at 6:54. I think we've only got one more column to go. How are we feeling? Think we can make it? Just some images, right? How hard can images be? All right, so we're going to come back into our HTML. We're going to go to our column 3. And the first thing that we see is we've got a little thing that says advertisement. That's becoming pretty popular. Just so people know what they're seeing there isn't content that the news site published. It is something that they are advertising for. So I'm going to do that as a little p tag. I will say advertisement. I'm gonna save that. I'm gonna come over here. I'm gonna refresh, and we get advertisement. So Alina, you already noticed it is in a gray font. And there is one other thing that is wrong there, and that is that the text is not centered. Okay, so what we are going to do is we are going to look at our column, and really everything should be centered in that column, right? I want my images to be centered. I want the text to be centered. So instead of worrying about targeting each individual item, I'm just going to say, hey, that right column, just text center that sucker. Everything in there, just make it center. What do I care? So I come back over here, I refresh, and we're in the center, but I do need to make that gray. And so I'm going to go into my CSS, and I'm going to have to put some kind of label on this. So I am going to say class equals add label. And when I'm in here, I'm going, oh, look, that author tag is already gray. I kind of don't need to rewrite color gray out. So I'm just going to borrow some of that CSS there. All right, I come back over here, I refresh, and it's like, yeah, add label, author label, it's all gray to me. What do I care? All right, so we're making really good progress. We just got to get our images showing up. So I'm going to drop in not one, but two of my images. And I'm going to say add one. And I'm going to say image source equals add two. Save. Anyone guess what's going to happen here?
Nothing.
Pics are too big. They're so big, we can't even see them. They're all the way down here. If we zoom out, it may be a little bit. No, it was like image is too big, can't fit it in that column. I'm dumping them all the way down here for you. All right, so we clearly don't want that. So I'm going to come back into my code. I am going to add a way for me to target them. So I'll say class equals add image. And you know what? This one, I also want to have all the same styling as my first image. So they're both going to get add image. I come down here, I go to my add image, and I'm going to say, let's do a width of 90% on them. And the reason I'm doing that is I want some space on the left and right of them, but I also have the text center working because I did it on that entire column. So now not only are we shrinking down those images, but those images will be centered automatically for us. So I'm going to save, I'm going to come over here, I'm going to refresh. All of a sudden I got my site back. All right, very close to the end. Padding, you guys are beating me to it before I even have the chance. Carolyn, there is no way to automatically size the image. One thing I have seen people do is they just target the image tag and they make all tags a maximum width of 100%. And that means that now whatever image you put in will default to that. And then you can override it from there. So in my add image, I'm going to add a little margin to the top. And you could use padding here. It would work the exact same way. Sometimes margin is interchangeable. Sometimes it is not with padding. So I come over here, I refresh. All right, that's looking good. There is one more thing that my site has, the border, right? And so those little elements are what make your design not feel like you just dump things onto the page, right? That border really makes it stand out and makes it feel like that is its own standalone advertisement. So I come over here, I say border is going to be 1px solid black. I save, I come over here, I refresh on the right page, and I got my border. Now we could get fancy and say, oh, I would also like my border radius to be 5 pixels, right? And I can come up here and refresh, and now I get a little curve on my image. Now that's nice. Can anyone see a design issue with that? If the pics are pushed together, yes, that would definitely look weird of having the rounded corners. But because there's padding in there, I don't have a problem with that. Mel, you hit the nail on the head. The main image is not rounded. And so what your eye is going to is it's looking at this and it's going, one, there's not a border around that, which may not be a problem. But the bigger problem is, why are these images square and these rounded? And so that is something that you want to commit to, is that if you decide I want that rounded design, you want to be consistent with that design. So I could either go into my headline image and put a border radius on that. And this is just for effect to show you, we can completely round out an image and put a 500 pixel border radius on that. But that's overboard. What you will also see that will drive you crazy, but you may not be able to know why you're going crazy, is that one's a little bit more rounded than that one. That's going to bother me, right? And so what we want to do is we want to stay consistent and make it all 5 pixels everywhere. And then if we decided, oh, that border really does something nice to the advertisement images, we could decide to put a border on here. And it's just a little touch, but, spruces everything up a little bit.
Are borders favored for pics on websites or the opposite?
Not necessarily. For something like the advertisement, I would make the argument of that's kind of giving you the notion of it's bounding in the ad. So it doesn't feel like the ad is just, all over the page. For an image in the center story, some developers would argue that really adds something to it and makes it feel like a newspaper. Some people would say, but images wouldn't have a border in a newspaper, so they shouldn't have a border on a website. So that's a design decision. Me personally, I would make the argument that you would want it around the ad, but you wouldn't want it around a regular image that is on your site. But really, really up to the designer to decide that. All right, it's 7:03. I went 3 minutes over. Did you think you could make a website that looks like this in an hour? So the good news is you probably can't yet. The even better news is that with a little practice, you can. So while I had code up that I was referencing while I was going through all of this, that is mainly to make sure I don't look like an idiot or put something in that I'm going to regret teaching. With that said, the first time I made this site, I made this entire site in an hour. I wasn't teaching through it or explaining through it, but it is possible to bang together a site this quickly. And I actually went to the something.com website and was going to screenshot it and use it, and then ran into those copyright issues and went, oh, I'll just make a quick mock-up of this, right? And so I opened up my mock-up program and I went, this is such a basic layout, I'm just going to code it. And sometimes you do that as a developer. You kind of get into, what the design you want looks like, and then you can just go into your code and make something this quickly. The downside to doing that is, as a developer, you just start thinking about content and getting content to show up on the page, and don't think through in your head, oh, I would like a nav bar and a quick links bar. Or, oh, I would like, that center column to be a little bit wider than everything else. And that center column thing sounds so simple, but if you have 3 equal columns and then you build out all of your content in the center, now all of a sudden you go, oh yeah, that does look better if I make it a little bit bigger. So you make it bigger, and now your columns on the right, the images are getting squashed in too much. Or, oh, my headline image isn't growing big enough. Or, oh, there are all of these issues that you need to go in and fix yourself. And so that is the benefit of having at least a wireframe, and if not a wireframe, also a mock-up that you can then build against. So that is the workflow that you guys are going to be using for the second half of class, and the homework assignment that I am going to post during the break, which is remake this website. So 2 resources for you. One, the screenshot for this is already in the GitHub Classroom repository. So I would encourage you guys go open that, because that's what you should use as reference. The other thing that you can use is the code is in there, right? You could totally cheat and just copy and paste that code and submit it into the classroom and go, oh, I've done my hour-long weekend homework assignment, right? But the goal is for you to get practice in here, right? Get practice working with your tags, get practice making sure your opening and closing tags line up. Make sure you understand why things are nested. Wrap your head around the grid system. Get practice copying in Bootstrap, doing all of that. So we are going to take a break now, and I've got nothing else for the rest of class, and that is very intentional. So when you guys come back, open up a new folder in VS Code, get to writing some of this code out, and then I'm going to limit everyone to like a 10-minute question. And so if you have a question, feel free to throw it out. I will help you through answering just that question, and then we'll open it back up. And so the reason I'm doing that is some of you guys are going to fly through this code, and that's completely fine. And some of you guys are going to need help at a lot of different steps, right? And so the idea there is the people that are flying and get stuck close to the end, I'm able to answer that question and help you get going. But for the people who need the step-by-step help, you can throw out your question. I'm going to answer it for you and then not answer what the next step is. And that's going to let you guys kind of get your feet wet and get used to coding. So Carolyn, you are going to build a site that content-wise, I'm sorry, that layout-wise is identical. So you're building a news site, and the news site should have the same styling that I have here, with, you know, a bar at the top, a quick links bar, and then the main content with the center column being a little wider. You can put in whatever headlines you would like. You can put in any of your own images. You can use whatever color you would like. You know, it doesn't have to be an exact replica of my site. But the main thing that we want to get here is making sure the layout looks exactly the same. If you are like, I hate the grid system, I hate Max, I hate Bootstraps, the hell with all of it, you are welcome to use Flex here. I will probably be less help with Flex than I will be with Grid. But I would, if you are feeling really bold and you're like, I get all of this, I want to get fancy, you could totally use Flex and recreate the whole site that way as well. Doesn't really have to be a new site, Carolyn, but it's probably good to stay along those lines. Really, it's the layout that we want to hammer home in that HTML and CSS experience. If it ends up having different content in it, I'm not going to take off any points. I'd encourage you to put different content in it, just so I know you guys are all working on individual assignments. But the other thing I will say is, as questions are coming in, if you guys are stuck at that same point, give a little thumbs up in the Zoom reaction, because what that will tell me is, oh, we can all go in a breakout room, or I can send Caitlin off in a breakout room to help you guys through that. I think the only downside to the breakout room is that it doesn't end up on YouTube. But anyway, we can, when a question comes in, we'll use something in Zoom to say, do we want to answer this separately, or do we want to answer it together as a class? But anyway, I'm 9 minutes over my time. We're going to take a break. Because we are ahead of schedule, I am going to give everyone a break until 7:30. But if you would like to stick around and get started on questions now, you're welcome to. If you would like to take a break and come back at 7:30, it's completely fine. kind of unofficially ending class here, and we'll be here for the next hour and 20 minutes answering questions. But definitely take a break now, because taking a break is important, at least for a couple minutes.
Max, I just had a quick question.
Yep.
So I kept up with you for everything. So I should just personalize it and submit it?
Very impressive. Yes, that is all you
Okay.
need to do, and you're done for the weekend as well.
Oh. Good day. Thanks.
This is your weekend assignment. So you don't have to have this done by the end of class, but if you do, I need to go create an assignment so you can submit it.
I'm impressed. Anybody who kept up with you doing that, I'm impressed.
I don't know that any of my junior devs would be able to keep up with me during that.
Yeah.
So Max, I kind of kept up, but I was all over the place. My lines aren't perfect. Well,
That's completely fine.
no, I mean, like, it's not looking good.
So what I would do is I would, you always have two options here. You can either go in and start cleaning up your indentation, putting new lines in where you think new lines should go, kind of getting that indentation set correctly. The other option, which is almost always an option, is jump ship and start from the beginning.
All right.
And if you need help like going through that, you can definitely screen share and we can start. I can help you get that indentation right. But that's up to you.
I'll take a minute to try on my own and circle back.
Sounds like a plan.
Hey, Carolyn, are you there?
Yeah, wait a minute.
Uh,
Now you see me, now you don't.
Yeah,
I'm
I was
here.
gonna say
just-
the same thing Max just said, but I just want to make sure you're not like in the main folder. Like,
No, that's in my my code, week 2.
Yeah.
We were
so
creating.
is it just a file you need to delete, or is it like a folder inside that folder?
It's just, there's nothing in it yet. It's just, under week 2, day 3, then I like meant to create it. What didn't name it the way I wanted to. and
Oh,
I
yeah.
wanted to rename it or do it. No, I'm not touching anybody else's stuff. No.
Yeah, no. I just meant like, you know, if you opened up like my code, you don't want to delete the main folder that's your code folder.
No, oh, no.
So I'm
no,
just
no, no.
asking, yeah. So you're
No.
fine. So anything inside that, if you named it incorrectly, you can do what Max said, right click and delete, or you can right click
Oh.
and name.
Okay, I didn't see that part of the chat yet because I was catching up with a couple of emails
That's
from my
okay.
doctor. So, or I can go into the Finder desktop
Yep.
and change the name in there too.
It'll update in VS Code automatically for
But
you.
right click R for rename.
Just right click, like use your mouse and a menu should pop up.
The pad here. Yeah. I'm using the trackpad.
Okay, so it's 2 fingers on the
The
right
right.
corner.
You just
like
touch
bottom
it or
right corner.
you press it down.
Press it down.
Okay. And then it will. Okay. That was just,
Did you?
I got stuck there and couldn't proceed, making my files and stuff. It's like, there's got to be an easier way. All right, we're good. But no, I'm not.
Oh, no, you're
Delete
fine.
Delete off and let's rewrite hard drive. No.
Don't do that.
Format hard drive. Whoops. Yeah, no, we're good.
Okay.
I'm just freezing for some reason. I
Because
just put it up to 69 and I'm freezing.
it's gonna do the naughty winter stuff.
Oh
like-
yeah, that's what, when we moved here in 93, not 1893, 1993. Right after the blizzard.
I was
Yeah.
young.
Yeah, and I was stupid as well. I came here to do my graduate work at SU and all the pieces. It took forever for things to come together. It was like hell on earth. But we came right after that, and then then there was another snowstorm for Easter Sunday, and that's when they had the dog show. And we were staying at Red Roof Inn with our dogs, who were not in the dog show. So people were looking at us like, you got this boxer in this mud. It was just, yeah. No, I think I'm a little sick tonight because.
Oh no, sorry.
I'll be all right. I had 1 COVID vaccine, so we'll go get the next one.
I've heard
But-
that happens.
Oh, we're good. We're good.
Yep.
Yeah, no fear. There was another thing I put in Slack I had asked, and I meant to jump back in with my answer. I was just looking in settings just to try and get to know better, not to do anything and get cracking. And
So
it
you
had-
will, let's stop right there.
oh, you're back to class?
No, not back to class. Get to know better and confuse yourself more are 2 very different things. If you are in settings, you are very likely to confuse yourself more. So we should not be going into settings and digging in and figuring out what everything means. I have no idea what pruning is. Never done Git pruning before. Never needed to change that. And I know that it must be working because I've never changed it.
Mhm.
Right. And so that's one of those things where it's like, we want to be careful to not try and cover ground for everything, because as a developer, it's never possible to learn everything about the language or a framework or a tool or whatever it is. So like, unless there's a reason for you to go into settings, I would stay out of it.
Yeah, no, I didn't change anything. But I saw
did
that and I
you-
remember I had asked about pruning, and it's like, but it's not, the user doesn't do it. The system cleans things out and so it's really cool. I mean, what I learned when I did research on it real quickly, but no, yeah, I know. Yeah, we're good. Anyway, I'm gonna, I guess I have a few more minutes. I gotta kill my video and get back to, I had to do something personal, so.
No
All right,
problem.
thank you.
Yep, we'll be back at 7:30.
Yep, I'm here.
Brindy asked a question about linking Bootstrap. You just need the CSS, and you can use the CSS from the CDN. In the later modules, when Caitlin starts teaching, you'll definitely want to pull in that JavaScript file as well. But the grid layout stuff, because it is pure CSS, it does not need the JavaScript to work, at least for what we covered tonight. So I'm guessing most of you guys are trickling back. I would encourage you to turn on your videos so we can share in your pain of trying to get through this assignment. You know, a good live stream of your computer being thrown out the window. You know, not encouraging that because it's hack up state property, but you know, every now and then it does happen. So what I am going to give the option to you guys is I can turn off the YouTube stream now. The only downside to that is any questions you ask and the answers won't be recorded. But I also don't want you guys to feel pressured into not asking a question because we are recording. So I'm gonna put that poll out there. And you guys should be able to answer it in Zoom. This is the first time I am using a Zoom poll, so see if it works.
If we don't have a preference,
You don't have to vote.
okay.
It's a tight race.
It is, it's split.
Susan loves polls. I love polls too. Let's do more.
Oh, we had one take the lead and then it's now back to tie. Well, I love polls when they aren't tied because that means I have to make a decision. Anyone else get a vote there for whether we want to stop the recording or keep going? Oh,
Ooh.
Back in the lead. This is my entertainment for the night. So
This is
I
better
thought
than
we weren't
March
supposed to
Madness.
be competitive. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. This is fun. I like this.
all right, last call. Otherwise, it looks like we are going to keep the recording going. All right. And that poll. And I'm gonna open it up now for any questions. And then at every question, unless we keep on getting the same answer for all of them, you guys can decide whether you want that done in a breakout room or you want to hear the answer to the question. So we will open it up now to any questions. Even if the question is, where the hell do I get started? All right.
That
well,
is the question.
Sure. Go
Where
ahead.
in the hell do I get started?
Great question. So two things. If you have a second monitor, even if that monitor is your phone, I would pull up the YouTube video, jump about 30 minutes into it, and follow those steps. That's the cheeky answer. The less cheeky answer is you're going to want to create a folder called new site in your my code directory. You are going to want to create your index.html and style.css. You are going to want to get your starter HTML in there and get your CSS linked up. Then you're going to want to pull up the mockup, or if you're following along with the video, you can kind of just pause as you go and start from the top and work your way down. And that's the whole assignment. It's easy. Come on, guys. Don't you know that? Totally joking.
Yeah, really easy, Max.
I mean, I would say I could do this in my sleep, but the sad thing is you start dreaming about it in your sleep, and that's when you can't do it. It's
funny that you say that, because I've literally been dreaming about codes like since this program started. Can't get away from it.
When that happens, feel free to share your nightmares with the group. You know, we can get through this together. We'll get out the virtual couch and we can talk through your nightmares.
We're gonna have to invite Jason to that video recording.
Yes, it is something that definitely happened. So, you know, you guys will get through it, and just remember, one step at a time. When you load that mock-up, don't get overwhelmed that you know there's so many different items on the screen. Just start at the top and go, all right, just that top bar. How do I get the words to show up in that top bar, right? Like really break it down into what you're trying to accomplish. If you're feeling really bold, you could just pull up the mock-up and try and do it without the video, right? So just try and go through it and figure it out. And if you get stuck, instead of going to the video, you can go to the code and see how I did it in my code as well. I wouldn't encourage you to just go line by line from the code. But if you kind of go through with this, I've got the mock-up up, let me figure out how I'm gonna get that to show up, and you go component by component, that's also a completely fine way to do it. If you are a little bit behind, or you felt like this class just flew by, the video will probably be a better way to learn all of that. But there are different options, because everyone doesn't learn from a video. Alina, I type close to 100 words a minute, but syntactically typing code slows anyone down. So when I type code, I'm closer to 60 words a minute, and I think the average for people typing JavaScript is closer to 40. Closed captioning on the YouTube videos is a good question. If that's something that I can just turn on the Hack Upstate account, I will go do that right now. But let me get back to you on that.
I just checked YouTube. It looks like it doesn't occur on the live videos, but it's on older videos. So it might just take time for YouTube to generate that captioning. Like, I'm sure there's just a program that runs and it captures all the audio and types it out in the caption.
Yeah. So thank you for that. Well, as soon as I end the YouTube meeting, the closed captioning should be available in a couple hours. But thanks for checking that, Caitlin. Beat me to it.
So for the assignment, you want us to screenshot what we created, or do you want us to upload the file?
Upload the HTML and CSS files. You don't have to upload your images, but those two HTML and CSS files. And the reason why that's important is the browser could show everything, and then I could get into your code and be like, dear God, who was killed in the writing of this code, right? Like there are other things we want to check in there, like your indentation, or you know, little habits that may start forming now that we want to stop before you get too far. So when I review the homework assignments starting early next week, I am going to be checking for code quality in addition to code completeness.
If my code is wrong, I'm blaming you because I followed along during the video.
Oh, absolutely. I will find a way to critique everyone, even if it's my own code. My critique, if you follow all my code and submit it, is, oh, you need more originality here.
Oh, mine has plenty of originality.
But anyway, I am going to try and get feedback to you on this assignment early next week. And even if you submit the assignment and you're like, look, I'm sorry I didn't have as much time to work on this. I only got this first section done. But I'm going to try and work on this more throughout the week. That's completely fine. Like, don't think that because the due date is Sunday at 11:59 means you have to stop working on it. You're welcome to continue on it. With that said, this is not code that you're going to be using in a later module. It's not like if you fall behind on this, you're going to be permanently stuck behind and fall into this endless abyss. So the assignment is just a way for us to touch base and see how you guys are making progress. But it's not something that, you should be stressed over. And if you are stressing over a part of it, feel free to ping me in Slack or throw it in the students channel, and hopefully we can alleviate some of that stress. And if you're someone who can't learn while I'm talking, or you just need to be on your own, get out of here. Go. You don't need to be here. The vote was to keep the recording going, so you can always come back in and see questions that get answered between now and 8:30. But if you would like to drop out of the Zoom room, that is completely fine.
Did you want us to upload it on GitHub?
You can if you want.
Well, I don't know. I'm looking at the assignment and I don't, how do you want us to upload it?
You can either upload the HTML and CSS in the upload files. So if you click view assignment in Google Classroom, there should be over on the right an upload files button.
Add or create?
Add or create, that's it.
Okay, so then Google, okay, got it.
I have a question. Can you
I
hear me?
hopefully have an answer. Go ahead.
Not even the coding. It was when I first started the video. Something about the font and the Times New Roman not using it. I sort of missed what that was about.
Yeah, good question. So most browsers default to Times New Roman.
Okay.
And unless you are the New York Times, you should probably not be using Times New Roman. In fact, I said that as a joke, but New York Times does not use Times New Roman.
Okay.
So Times New Roman is the default, and because it's the default, it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb.
Okay.
And so I would encourage you to change that font. However, there are only about 12 fonts. That number is probably not entirely accurate, but there are only 12-ish fonts that are guaranteed to be installed on everyone's computer, whether they're on a Mac or a PC or whatever it is. So Bootstrap happens to use a font that is installed on everyone's PC, and so you don't have to worry about it. If you drop in Bootstrap, you'll notice your font just magically changes for you, and using that's completely fine. Caitlin, do you think that you could cover Google Fonts in your week?
Probably.
Okay.
I was gonna go over like a couple things in my week. So we have Bootstrap, we have SAS, but with those two things, it's a lot of customizing and making it look nice. So I feel like that fits in pretty well.
Cool. So we will go over Google Fonts not next week, but the following week, of how you can pick different fonts and pull them in. It used to be very complicated, and Google said there should be an easier way of doing this where the font just works in every browser on every operating system. And so Google has this free way that you can go in, pick out a font, copy 2 lines of code in, and that font just magically starts working. But you don't have to worry about that if you are using Bootstrap, because they handle that for you.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much.
I'm gonna add that to my Trello board of things to add.
Thank you.
Yep.
Like my file is so pretty, I don't want to exit out. Which is sad because it's like the first actual anything that I've created.
I believe that's called the IKEA syndrome, and it's like an actually documented thing that if you give someone the same piece of furniture that's already assembled, and then you make them assemble it, I'm sorry, you take two study groups. One, you just give them a piece of furniture and you say, can you value this? And they come up with a price that's pretty accurate to like what you would pay at IKEA. And then you give that same furniture to someone else and say, build this. And then when they are done building it, you say, okay, how much do you think this is worth? The response that you get, the value is always higher because they invested the time into building it. So even though you are asking them the cost of the building materials, they will give you a higher value because they invested the time into building it. So that is actually a thing of you'll write out your code and you'll submit it, and the feedback you'll get on it is, this looks like shit. And you go, but it doesn't. It looks so pretty. I built it.
Oh my gosh. Can I just tell you, like during this whole video, when I was coding along with you, I'm sweating so bad. And I know this is on YouTube, but it's like my hands are so cold. I was trying to keep up with you, like, holy crap, why is Max typing so fast? But it's okay.
It's a good level to aspire to. Like that is how quickly I actually write code for 8 hours a day. Well, 6 hours a day, because you've got meetings and planning and all of that stuff. Not to mention, it is a real thing to acknowledge, like your brain takes time to get into code mode. And I can tell you, when I get messages at like 3:30, 4 o'clock in the day, my English don't work. I tried to type English and English just don't come out. It's just like I miss letters, or I'll use the wrong to, or like it's just like I'll just be typing and skip over entire words. So like your brain does get better at switching in that mode, and when you do get in that mode, that speed goes through the roof. But it is definitely something it takes a while to get into. Which is why I said, like, feel free to drop out, because if I were coding and listening to me talk, I'd go crazy, So like, if you need to focus, definitely feel free to drop, and you can always come back into the room anytime between now and 8:30 if you have a question. And yes, Laura said a great point on do not use Times New Roman on your resume, or I believe the default in Word is Calibri. Or I don't know how you pronounce it, but no defaults in anything that is getting published. I'm turning off my camera, but if anyone has a question, I'm still here. Feel free to throw it out.
Hey, Max, I have a question. I still have the window open from the live stream thing you did for us, not live stream, but the Visual Studio Code. And that's just sitting there and it's very happy. And I'm trying to get my own Visual Studio Code account and it's just up and running in a different window and it's acting really strange on me.
Yeah, so you're gonna want to go to File all the way up at the top and drop down to New Window.
All right, so I click on the application, File in the menu, New, oh, yeah, okay, yeah. And
And
then
now,
I can,
now you should be all set to go File Open and open the My Code, folder. And then you should be able to start creating your own folders and files from there.
great, thank you.
No problem. Alina, you have a question?
No, we're not telling the answer.
I can help on any level except level 24, and it has nothing to do with my hatred for Flex.
Were we talking about Flex, Froggy?
I mean, I did 24 for Max, so
I'm
You
still, like,
betray my trust. How dare you?
I still have the tab up. And I completed all
Max
23,
hates Flex.
23 of them. I go back every day and it's like, is it
I'm
this?
stuck on
Nope.
6. Can
Wrong.
someone help me?
Do you
I can
want
try to help
on
you on
6?
6.
I mean, I
Just
I-
can't help on 24.
Yes,
No help
24
on
is a
24.
sacred level.
I get that I have to do a combination to, and you can't move the lily pad, right?
No, you
No,
can,
it's about
And you
moving
can't
the
move the
frog.
pond.
let me
You know
pull
what?
it up.
Don't tell me 24. Hopefully by the end of the 6 months, I can figure it out on my own.
The solution to number 24 is throw the computer out the window.
Oh, I'm on level 3
So
here.
should I go into my Flex?
Yeah, so level 6.
All right,
Oh,
hold
okay.
on. I forgot where that's actually not an application, is it? Okay, hold on. Oh, here he is. Okay. I'm assuming
Okay,
it's a
so
he.
there are 2 properties that they want you to use here: justify content and align items, right?
Yes.
And so the nice thing about Flexbox Froggy is when you come in here 3 months later and you go, I want to get that thing over there and I know I've got to use Flex for it. If you hover over it, what they're telling you is all the values that you can pass in for justify content. So it defaults to Flex start, but you can flex end, you can center, you can space between, or you can space around, right?
Right.
And
I'm
so-
not using a mouse though. I'm using the trackpad. So how do I hover?
Just move the
Just
mouse.
move the mouse on top of it.
Move the trackpad like the pointer.
Just let it sit there? Because all
Yeah.
he does is pulsate.
No, over justify content. Put your mouse over justify content.
For example, oh, right in the list up
Yeah.
here.
Mhm.
Oh, there we go. Yes, I did. Yeah.
Okay, so
I saw
what we're
that
gonna
last
do is we're gonna type in justify content, and
Okay.
then we're gonna type in center.
Okay. I am actually at level 6 though.
I'm on level 6 as well.
And I was in level 1 staring at it. So there we go. Now we're on in the same library, I guess.
Okay. And so I did justify content center, and you notice that what that did to my frog is it moved him over the center, but it moved him over to the center horizontally. It didn't move him to the center vertically. And so to
Right.
get him to the center vertically, I'm going to align my items, right? And then I'm going to hover over this again. And it's going to say, oh, I can flex start, I can flex end, I can do any of those. So if I flex end him, he's going to jump all the way down to the bottom.
Right.
I don't want him at the bottom. I
Oh.
want him right in the center.
Right.
And so I get the next button because I got him on his little pad and I'm off to my next level.
Okay. So, and I understand the logic behind that, but I don't think I did the right. Let me see. Looking at what you did again. All right. So, oh, you're on level 7 now.
Yep, let me go back.
Okay, yeah. I just had to get
Um,
the Flexbox Froggy made a little smaller so I could watch what you're doing while I'm trying to do.
Caroline, this is Brielle. I just want to say one of the reasons I got through Flexbox Froggy was I made a cheat sheet. I don't know if anybody can see this. I did an index card and I wrote out all the options for each thing. So
That's super helpful. And whatever tool works for you is great. There is one that Caitlin shared in the chat. That is basically they made that in a website form.
Yep.
And so there's definitely something to be said about taking your own notes in a format that makes sense for you. It's not anything that you would ever be forced to memorize. I can't use Flex without going to the CSS tricks that Caitlin sent and looking at the properties and getting them. So the good news is as you use them more, you will memorize them. But having either your own notes as a quick reference or being able to go to like the website that Caitlin sent, whatever works for getting you to memorize it, definitely go for it.
Yep. All right, so how many steps did it take you?
2.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. All right, hold on here.
And Corey, I will get to you next.
All right, so make this small enough so I can see.
All right, I'm
All
going to
right,
stop
so-
my share. Do you want to share your screen?
Oh, I don't like to share, but I guess I will. Oh, anyway, the window moved down. All right, here we go. Oh, now I can make it easier. You guys go away. All right. Do you see it?
Yep.
Oh, okay. They're just waiting for me to finish friggin' around. All right. All righty. So
You're going to
go ahead.
You're going to get your mouse in the code editor in line 3. Okay. And you're going to use your CSS properties that they're telling you to use to center it, to center the frog.
Right.
So go ahead. There are 2 properties there. You got to start with one or the other.
Right. And I think I'll start with justify. Oops. And all you have to do is space and center, no fancy.
So look at the property above it. CSS always has a key value pair, right? So the computer needs to know the property that you're calling is justify content. And the value of that is center. So look what your frog did.
Yes.
He's halfway centered.
Right. He's not quite centered?
Well, he's centered horizontally. Now we've got to get him centered vertically.
Right. So align items center. Oh, align is vertical.
Yes.
Oh, so it's as simple as that. Oh, why was I not? I was overthinking it. All right. Thank you.
No problem. All
Oh,
right,
I left
Corey.
out something. All right.
Where are you at?
Just needs, the VS Code looks a bit different when I opened it up. So I just need to get.
Do you want to share your screen?
Yep. Okay, is it sharing?
Not yet.
Share, here it is. Boom. No, where is it? How do I move that? Can
You should be able, okay, so you don't
Where
even
was it?
have VS
It
Code
was-
open.
No, I closed it, but I just had it open. Hold on. Okay. So, well, well,
Okay, so you've got module 3 opened, but so I would say take a step back because we don't even know where you're at. So we're gonna go to File up at the top and drop down to Open.
mhm.
And then from here, we're like module 3. We have no idea where module 3 is. So we're
No, I
gonna
was
click on
exploring. Yeah, I was
desktop over on the left.
Desktop on the left. Yeah.
And then you're gonna open up, go ahead and open up CIC, see
Yeah.
what you have in there. Okay, so you just have your code base folder. The classroom code base is not where you want to be. That's where
Okay.
the instructors are gonna put their code. You need to have a place to put your own code.
Okay.
So what we're gonna do is we're gonna right click and we're gonna, oh, I'm sorry, we're gonna hit new folder in the bottom left area. Just new folder all the way at the bottom.
Oh, there it is, right there.
Okay. And go ahead and click on that.
Move this out the way.
And we're going to call that folder my code. But you don't want to use any spaces in it. So you can either use a dash or just capitalize the C.
Is that what you want?
Yep.
Okay.
And then from here, we're going to create another new folder and we're going to call it module 2. And same thing, no space. Okay, and create. And then we're going to open, okay, it already opened that one for us. So I'm going to suggest at least one more folder level. So I would just create a new folder and call it news. Okay, and then when we hit create there, all right, we've now created all of those folders, but we want to tell VS Code, don't open all the way down at the news level, open back all the way up at the my code level so I can work with folders inside of there. So up at the top where it says news, you could hit the back button a couple times, or you could click on news and just drop down to my code and then hit open in the bottom right. Okay, and so what that did is over on the left, we can now see module 2. So if we click on the little arrow next to module 2, we then see that news folder is in there. So if we right click on news, we can make a new file and call it index.html. And hit enter. And now that you've got index.html. So you can repeat that process, right click on news, and then new file, and create style.css.
Oh, creating the tabs. Style.css.
And hit enter on that. And now you've got style.css, and you should be good to keep going on the video from there.
Got it. Okay. And so mimic what you have in Explorer from the video. Because I think there's one more for Java, right?
We won't use JavaScript in this site, but there are probably 3 more files in there for the images.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And you're welcome to either use the images that I used, or you can just go to Unsplash and get your own images.
Right. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Phobelia, did I see your hand up?
You did, but thank you. You just answered my question when Corey asked the same question I had.
That's why we're here.
Thank you, Corey.
You're welcome.
I'm still here. If anyone has a question, feel free to shout it out and I'll jump back on camera.